Those are the skills that are going to be in extremely high demand heading into this new year of 2026. It's crazy to me how much easier it's gotten. If you are coming from an absolutely zero technical background and you're opening up N8N, you're already going to be overwhelmed, probably just because the interface is new. But once you get past that, you realize fundamentally, it really just comes down to logic. If you can do something manually and you know the process really well, you can automate it because it's just one step at a time. But I think maybe where people get into issues is they go straight into a process that's very complicated and very agentic rather than kind of taking those baby steps. When I really think back at all the automations and agents I've built, I think it really boils down to like maybe 15 core nodes. And if you can master those 15 core nodes, you can automate probably 97% of anything, really. When I think about building workflows, the last 20% is always the toughest because you basically need to test tons of different inputs, and then you need to test all those inputs again with a different model, and then you need to do it again with a different system prompt, and do it again with all these changes. That's really going to be the more important skill, rather than just building workflows. Is going to be making them actually ready. Now that you have this knowledge of AI automation, what are your options? How can you move from here to become a more valuable worker, to pick up some side income, to maybe even start your own business? Now is the best time to be getting into it.
Nate, what's up, buddy? Welcome to the podcast, brother.
How's it going, Dylan? Good to be here.
So what first got you to start making content around N8N?
Yeah, absolutely. When I discovered N8N, I was working my full-time job, and that was pretty much automation. So I was, building things with no-code tool called Alteryx. And I remember having this one product that I was working on where I hit this decision point in the automation, and it took a level of reasoning that typical logic couldn't. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I wish I could just like send this data to ChatGPT and then just have ChatGPT send it back, and then the automation continues. And then I looked into it and I was like, okay, that's AI automation. It is something that exists and it is possible. So that's how I kind of initially went down that rabbit hole of AI automation. And from there, I just started building stuff in my free time. I would literally sprint home from work just to get on N8N and build stuff. And one thing that I've always kind of known about myself when I want to learn something new is I like to teach it. If you can explain something from the beginning to end and someone can understand it and learn it, then that validates that you really do know what you're talking about. So the motivation was, I'm just going to create some videos, throw them on YouTube, just kind of for fun, also to teach myself, document my journey type of thing. And then because there was not a huge supply of N8N content on YouTube, but the demand was growing, the videos just started doing well. And then obviously that was the motivation from there, was to just continue to make more, and was getting nice comments and stuff. So that helped a lot too. And then just kept it going. And then from there it just evolved, and it's been a lot of fun.
Cool, man. Yeah, I feel the same way like with a lot of like channels. Is if you want to like learn something, right, you can watch a video on it, you get some retention, say 10%. You want to then do the thing, you get like 30%. And then if you teach the thing, you get 90% retention. And that's so true with and what's really cool about that and making content is that it's kind of like this double-sided thing where you're learning something and then you get to share something. So you get like extra value out of like learning the thing. You just have to go through the comfortabilities of making content, which can be a challenge in and of itself with making content side. I'm curious about like the ideation phase when you're coming up with ideas for making content, and like, how that shifted from you just starting out to you really being tapped into the community of N8N. Like, how do you source ideas, come up with ideas, figure out what you should make content on, or what you should dive into solve?
That is a really good question, because there's so much that goes into that. And that's something that I had to kind of learn throughout my journey. Because when I first started, it was just like anything that I could actually build. Because at the time, if you go look at N8N content from September when I started, it is so much more technical. You actually had to like build out this little JSON payload of schema you wanted to send over to different nodes. And it's crazy to me how much easier it's gotten. But from there, I was like, anything I can get that works, I'm just going to make content on. But the reason I say it's an interesting question is because you kind of have to start with that end goal in mind. If you are trying to build services for, like a very niche specific audience, you can make that content with an optimized title for that audience. You'll get not very many views, but probably a really high conversion rate of people that are watching are genuinely interested in what you're building. So are you optimizing for, conversions on a specific niche, or in my case at the time, I was just kind of optimizing to grow the channel. So I was trying to think of templates that people might actually want to download. I was thinking of, you know, my best performing videos are the ones that are, agents that have like a cool thumbnail, and they're agents that have that's kind of say they can do a lot of stuff, compared to, if you think about what is like a very, very high value ad that someone could actually put into their business right away and actually see like an ROI that kind of scales up as their business scales up, those wouldn't perform as well on YouTube, even though it's like a higher value video. So it's a very interesting topic. But to get back to your original question, really, the community is so helpful to see. We offer tech support and stuff like that. So whenever people are posting about their issues, we always see common themes. So a lot of times I'm able to make some videos that address those common themes, or I take a look at use cases of what other people are building. And the thing about custom automations is there's an infinite amount. And also, if you ask someone, hey, can you build me like a customer support agent? There's an infinite amount of ways that they could build that for you. So I'm never really hurting for ideas. I've got a to-do list on a Google Doc, a very, very informal to-do list, and it's like video ideas, and it grows quicker than I can fulfill them. So far, don't really hurt for ideation, but I'm also able to do things like scrape my comments, scrape YouTube for high performing videos in my niche, and have AI, of course, help me look at my positioning and then generate me a list of new ideas. So it's always kind of staying fresh.
Love it. Yeah, I like the you had an AI agent, if you want to call it swarm or multi-agent use cases, where one of them was generating, find me 4 high-performing innate videos and then send it to somebody and all that
Yeah.
fun stuff. It was a great use case. I've actually used it at some of the meetups and said, hey, this is something Nate Herk made and all that. And so I think it was really cool that use case because it's a specifically what you're talking about, figuring out what's working well in terms of high performing videos or looking at your comments, but like looking for these ideas of what do people want. So whether you're a business and you're trying to figure out what services to provide, or you're a content creator, like what content should I make, a lot of it comes back to like getting insights from what your community is asking for, what other people are doing. I'd be curious about the automations. Like, what automations do you have in place to help make your content creation life easier or better?
That's a good question. And you may be disappointed by my answer, to be honest. I don't have too many. It's a very, very manual process. I'd say it's more about the ideation, where I have, something that scrapes my comments so I can just kind of stay tapped into what people are asking about. I've got one that looks at things in my niche, of course, analyzing like high performing titles and thumbnails and stuff like that. I don't take that into consideration as much, given the nature of my content is very educational and it's less on the side of like curiosity driven. There's a little bit of an element there, but not the same. And
Mm.
yeah, and then the other one is just like staying tapped into AI news. So getting like a little email summary every morning of here are things that are going on in the space. And then I have an AI that's obviously kind of system prompted on me and my channel. And it kind of says, here are maybe some ideas that you could use this, like, a GPT-5 job. But here's how you could make it a little more specific to your audience rather than the hundreds of other YouTube videos about GPT-5 just killed other models, but that sort of thing. So
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying. That is just sourcing data. I know one of my N8N buddies, he hooked up like an RSS feed to N8N to try to get the download of what's going down, and so you can do that or see what else is performing in, because there's always new models coming out quickly. Grok 17 or GPT 32 or whatever we might be having coming out soon. And so it's cool to aggregate that data and get that all together. Then part of what we're talking about here is this content creation and figuring out niches, right? You said that this is my niche. I've noticed that there's different types of like in it and content out there.
mhm.
For example, you don't do as much voice agents as much as others do. Like, what do you think are the different niches of innate in content or innate in interests that are out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like you said, I haven't made too much with voice. I haven't done too much either with like full systems as far as like front end, back end, bam, productize it. So I think in my mind, it's kind of the way I'm positioned right now is just kind of very general, but more so when I'm making a video, I'm thinking of, could a beginner watch this and be inspired to download it and then try it out and feel like they feel comfortable, actually building something. So that's kind of the way I approach it. I think there's obviously the people that come from a more technical background and their whole mindset on end is a little different. I think it's more of like a end is insanely powerful. We've got the visual aspect, but me as a native coder, I'm going to use this to spin up a POC really quick and show the power of it. And then I'm going to turn that end workflow kind of into more of a programmatic agent. So then there's like the technical piece. And then, like you said, the voice agents. And then I think there's the piece where people are maybe less looking to spin up like an AI agency or become like an AI freelancer with workflow automation. And they're more looking to create like a SaaS and they want to be able to productize something, wrap it up, and just scale to the moon. So those would kind of be the areas I'd say that I don't touch on too much yet. You know, everyone ultimately that's learning this kind of stuff is looking to either monetize it in some way or to become more valuable in their work. So that's kind of the next natural evolution that I think I'm moving towards. I haven't touched too much on like the sell these templates or blah blah blah, but am starting to look at moving more towards the now that you have this knowledge of AI automation, what are your options? How can you move here from here to become a more valuable worker, to pick up some side income, to maybe even start your own business? So that's kind of the foundation I've been building is just purely education for no coders. But there's so many other ways to go with it.
Yeah, what I've seen too is in a couple of categories. You're either a developer that wants to have a better toolbox because you want to be more valuable at a company or you want to get hired. You're an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure out how does this thing work in my business? And I maybe am not that technical, but I'm just trying to figure out what this looks like. Or you're some sort of agency or you want to be an agency. So, like, okay, how do I step into a business that I will enjoy and get paid well for with having an AI agency? Or you're enterprise and you're afraid of the little guys running rampage all over your stuff and you want to figure out how do you stay relevant with
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
N8N to really, get more value out of the company by automating the low level hanging tasks that take up a lot of time and don't really add a lot of value. And so, to me, that sounds like the categories in terms of the types of people. Is
Yeah.
there anybody else I missed in those types?
Um, Maybe the only other thing that comes to mind is very similar to what you said about enterprise, but just the small businesses that are knowing they need to get ahead. They don't want to pay an agency or a freelancer to do so. So they're learning to help grow their own business without making a hire. But I think ultimately, yeah, those kind of four main buckets is pretty holistic.
Yeah. Yeah, and if there's another one, let us know. Comment down below if there's another type. I'm actually curious. In terms of what we're talking about is you said to talk about being not that technical and then kind of coming at it from a code first perspective. Can you talk to me about this thought and belief around I'm not that technical, so I can't do N8N, or your own experiences with being how technical you need to be to get into N8N, and what that looks like for beginners just getting started up and running with N8N?
Yeah. So if you are someone that has no background with JSON, code, any of this kind of stuff, and you want to get into N8N, sort of like what the mindset should be, is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, well, some people say, okay, in order to learn N8N, I now need to learn a bunch of coding languages, or this seems kind of daunting, or like I don't know where to get started. Like there's a thing about I would say a misconception, or maybe it could be a conception of I need to be X amount technical in order to use N8N, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
any thoughts about that?
I do have some thoughts about that. I do. I would say that it is a very, very common misconception. I think that what happens, it's kind of referred to as the entrepreneurial life cycle that I talk about a lot in my community. And I know like people like Alex Hermosi talk about it, but it doesn't apply just to entrepreneurs. It basically applies to whenever you try something new, like a new initiative, a new venture. It's this life cycle where you start off here, where you are hold on, I don't want to mess this up. You're an uninformed optimist because you see the opportunity and you know it is something that there's lots of upside to, but you don't know enough about it to really understand how it works. So that's when you dive into it, and you kind of are on this high, and then you turn this corner where you become an informed pessimist because now you know the complexities that go into it. It's very overwhelming, as anything is. Like even to me at this stage, if I think about trying a new tool, I don't even want to because I don't know where the buttons are. I don't know how the data flows. But if I just spent, like 10 minutes and really dove into it, it would all become very clear. So then you come down to the valley of despair where you can either become an informed optimist or you just drop off basically. And so this is where the valley of despair, that's where I think a lot of people need to be able to push through. Because I will say, if you are coming from an absolutely zero technical background and you're opening up n8n, you're already going to be overwhelmed, probably just because the interface is new. And whenever something's new, it's like, whoa, where do I click? But because it doesn't look like it's unfamiliar. But once you get past that, you realize fundamentally, it really just comes down to logic. And I believe in this so strongly. Like when I started doing automation at my job, I was insanely overwhelmed, but I realized that all it takes is basically understanding step by step what you want to happen, and it's basically, if you can do something manually and you know the process really well, you can automate it because it's just one step at a time. But I think maybe where people get into issues is they go straight into a process that's very complicated and very agentic rather than kind of taking those baby steps. But also with the way that all of this, like Cloud Opus 4, GPT-5 can help you generate JSON in order to, create an end-to-end workflow to start with. I think that that's going to help a ton because that eliminates a lot of the barrier to entry of like, where do I start? But I don't think people should rely on that to actually be like a production ready system. I think it gives you a really good place to start. It gives you an idea of like a certain API you may want to use or how data should flow. But yeah, I don't think that you need any sort of background. And I think that that's already been proven with over the past 6 months how many people are building some insane stuff nowadays.
Yeah. What you're talking about this is also there's two things we're talking about. So one is when you step into something new, there's this tendency to get overwhelmed and then bounce out, right? It's in the hero's journey framework, we call that the trial of tears. You jump in, you get smacked, you're like, nope, too much, and you bounce out,
Mm.
right? But if you can go inside there, especially if you have a mentor or a guide that can kind of lead you past the process, you can stick with it long enough to where it becomes, this new becomes normal, right? And then when you go into this normal thing, you're like, okay, now I'm very comfortable with this. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I first saw N8, and I was like, looks cool, but like, what is all this stuff? Now it's just super familiar. I can go in, I know what needs to happen, I know what I need to automate, I know what nodes do what. So it all makes a lot of sense. And that second step of going into this clarity of thought is a lot of people, whether in businesses or whatever, they have an idea, but it's not really a refined idea in their head. They don't actually have a clear model. And so if you can map out those steps on a digital whiteboard, I use Lucid, use Miro, but like whatever things work is how can I see what am I doing? What do I
Mm-hmm.
really want to do? And SOPs are so awesome. And if you can get those and start to map those things out, then it seems to make those things possible. But you don't technically need to be technical. Ideally, you might have a technical friend, like a phone a friend. You hit a technical button, they show up. But overall, it sounds like it's solvable because I'm sure you've seen. Do you have any like stories or things of people, either part of your communities that have come in with maybe limited technical knowledge and be able to see some success in the back half? Do you have any stories about that come to mind?
Yeah, I have so many so many cool moments in the community where people kind of hit that realization where they're initially drawn to the community because they see a template that they want. They download it, they hit run, and they see some errors, and then they're just kind of confused. And so they come for support and they try to figure out what's happening. And once we kind of like guide them in the right direction, as well as like explaining maybe, like this is a great place to start because you can see data move through. But if it works, don't just celebrate that it works. Actually look at every single node and click throughout the whole process to understand. And so there's one person I'm thinking of in particular. She did that. And I remember she posted on LinkedIn about like, this is an awesome automation. And then she also came back to me like a week later and said that she took that advice basically and looked at how the data moved through each step. And then what she did is she rebuilt the system without looking at it again. And I thought that was a
Cool.
huge win because that basically validated to her that she really understood how that exact system worked. And I think that kind of highlights this theory of like start with the end in mind. And if you have a very clear picture of what you want to build, the analogy I always use is, if you dumped out a bag of Legos, but you put the instructions like under the rug, you could probably get there, but it would be really hard compared to if you just looked at the instructions that said A connects to B and then B connects to C and C connects to D. It becomes very clear once you understand the steps in order that you need to follow.
Yeah, it's almost like learning how to read sheet music if you play songs, right? You don't really need to know the song, you just need to know how to read the sheet music. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
map out these steps And you're like, okay, I get what these nodes do. I get what these notes do. I'm going to look at this map, and then I can follow these maps, and then left to right, follow it out. And I love that because you kind of say, okay, this is a working model, because you make great workflows, like the agent swarm one. I used that one at a meetup, right? I went and I said, oh, this is neat, cool. Downloaded it, uploaded it, and I did it maybe, I don't know, it was maybe 45 minutes before the event. I downloaded it, connected it all,
There you
got it all
go.
hooked up, and I was like, all right, guys, just want to check. Just want to let you know, full disclosure, this isn't mine. but the power of N8N is I could connect all these things, but because I've already hooked up Telegram before and Google and Appify and these other ones, I already knew the process. I already knew how these things worked and functioned. And because I could do that, I could get up and running and showing off something really neat and really insightful. And so I think that's one of the powers of N8N is being able to have someone, you trailblaze a path through this technical jungle. And then I was able to go back and go, oh, thank you for this map. And I just downloaded it, connect all the dots. And then it's nice because then you can go by step. And I had to teach how some of the stuff works. So I had to go through these things line by line to show them off to the community, say, this is how this system works and this is what this looks like. And so I've noticed this with masters because N8N shockingly has several N8N masters a part of their group internally. Is there's always this thing of like methodical, like you go through, you make the map, and then you methodically move through one node at a time, and you see what's going on, and you understand what's moving, versus the shotgun. It doesn't work. Okay, I'm gonna throw my computer away, or rage quit or
Mhm.
whatever. So I love it's seems so simple what you're saying, man, but it's such a valuable key of like, just look at them and like, oh, become familiar, form a relationship with it. Oh, this
Mhm.
is my Google Sheets. I love you so much. I've missed you. Thank you for holding all my data. Mr. Telegram bot, could you please help answer my questions? If you get familiar with these things, it is better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to jump off that real quick, too,
Yeah.
it's like when I really think back at all the automations and agents I've built, I think it really boils down to like maybe 15 core nodes. And if you can master those 15 core nodes, you can automate probably 97% of anything, really. And similarly, when I think about the error messages that I've received, it's probably a total of like a range of like 7 error messages. It's either kind of like an invalid API key, or, you know, like permissions are wrong, or the JSON body was not proper JSON. It's like a 5 to 7 core error messages. And the problem there is, I think a lot of people will tend to see that error message and just kind of get overwhelmed. But if you can actually understand the pattern of, okay, when I got this error message, this is where I looked. Or when I did this, got this error message, I had to look through the logs to see where the error happened and pinpoint the issue, fix it. But then don't just like move on. Remember why that broke, and think about, this broke because this happened. I fixed it by doing this, and that's what addressed that error message. And now I get to this point where it's not ideal. People will send me just a screenshot of an error message. Ideally, they'd send more context, right? But they send me just a screenshot of the error message, and I say, I'm assuming this is what's wrong. Check there. And they'll be like, how in the world did you know that? And I'm like, because I've seen this error message 500 times in the past week. It's just pattern recognition. A lot of it comes down to that.
What do you do if you don't know? If you haven't solved this problem before, what's your go-to method for solving unknown problems?
Yeah, that's a good question, because ultimately it will still happen at some point. And the first thing I try to do is, before I go to the internet, I want to see if I can do it myself, because that's how you really break down and understand it better. And that just basically means I read the error message and follow what it tells me to do. A lot of times it will tell you exactly what's breaking, and you kind of just have to go there and find out. But let's say for some reason I spend a couple minutes and I'm stumped. I'll just copy that error message and just paste it into Google, and then I'll just say N8N at the end of it. And almost 9 times out of 10, that's just going to pull up like 5 links to the N8N forums, or like to my community or someone else's community, or someone's basically pasted that exact same error message, and then the community helps them solve it. In that case, you just kind of follow those steps there. Like I said, that pretty much always does the trick. But if it
Mhm.
doesn't, then I'm just going to paste it into a thought partner, an AI thought partner, whether that is GPT or Claude, and just kind of give it context. That's really what's important when you're dealing with these things. You can't just paste the error message right in. You have to say, like, here's my flow. Here are the variables I'm sending over. Here's the error message I got. What could be the problem? Not just like fix this. maybe help me think of what could be the problem, and it will give you some options. And then a lot of times I'll also just like put a screenshot of my flow into there, and it will help me think even better. So that's kind of what I do. And then I'd say last resort, I would go to like a paid community or something like that where someone else, maybe like an expert, could help me look at it. But
Have knowledge. It makes me want to build an automation that like I have, okay, this is where the typical answers are found, and then have an AI agent that will then, check the forums, check
mm-hmm.
this, check there, check Google, and it like looks for what's the chance of this one being found, and then
Yeah,
serving that back. I wonder if there's something like that out there.
yeah.
So,
Well, I honestly don't use that AI assistant too much,
mhm.
but I think that's going to start to become my plan B after looking at it myself, because of the way that that's like where it's pulling its knowledge from, and because it's natively right in there, and because with all of this, text to workflow stuff getting better and better, I'm assuming it's going to get better and better at troubleshooting as well. And so if N is natively looking at the JSON you've got going on in that JSON payload, not to get too technical, but there's the error message in there, and AI can understand like the flow. So I'm sure that's going to get really good too.
Love it. Yeah. And using that, you can use the AI agent assistant inside of there and then be able to call different things like, Apify or other types of services to be able to get data sources from everything that you need. And I could see that being helpful, but there is an appreciation and sometimes a skipping of the manual process, which I think you seem to be really good at, even though, you're one of the dudes who makes a lot of content on automations. It seems like a lot of processes are manual for getting certain things. What areas have you seen that are like valuable to keep as manual, and what things are valuable to keep for automations? Do you have any like personal use cases or things that you see as common things in your communities or the companies you work with?
It's another good question. When I think about my personal day to day, there are a lot of things that I still do manual. And I'd say, one of my biggest time commitments is the community. And obviously, I want all of that to be manual. I want the interaction from me to be manual. I want my live calls to be manual. I want my support to be manual and all that kind of stuff. Now, if we zoom outside of that, I really like to have a lot of the creativity process at the moment be manual, or at least with a big human in the loop step. Because all of my posts on LinkedIn, I completely handwrite. I don't I don't even use AI to give me an initial draft, because I think sometimes when you have an initial draft, your brain just like subconsciously gets swayed to write the way that the AI gave you that first template. So with LinkedIn, I like to handwrite all of it. But on the back end, I do like to have AI help me with generation of ideas, because idea generation is like you have full control over what you want to pursue or what you don't want to pursue. I think it may just depend on who you are as a person or what your goals are with, your content strategy. So I do see some use cases though where I would have a system that I would trust to just pump stuff out automatically. I think it really depends there. But when it comes to emails, my email agent, everything's a draft, no matter what. Like you just never know what could happen. I end up always just kind of sending them off. I skim through them, I send them off, and I've never really had like a big issue with one. But still, those are always a draft. You never know what could happen. Maybe there's a bug and the agent fires off 100 to the same person. It's just like, well, I don't. I think the way I approach like manual versus automation is manual for anything that I just want like, full control over no matter what, or I need my 100% personal touch on it as of now. And then when it comes to automation, very rarely is stuff like 100% AI automated for me. Automated, yes. You know, data prep, moving things from one sheet to another, I would automate that 100% of the way. But if we're really bringing AI into play, I like to have drafts, I like to have human in the loop, and I like to have a step of review. But if you're automating 90% of your work, that's still awesome. Like that is still 100% valuable. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the 90-10 rule, right? You want AI to do 90%, you go the last 10%. You take it the last mile. And you look at it and say, okay,
yeah,
this is before I send this out either publicly or in an email or wherever, is this cool? We cool with this? Right? And then it sounds like the other side is the 10% to get started. So how do I get started with it? Might be the ideation phase or
hmm,
come up with options or become aware of things. But really that section about getting started or closing it out are really helpful bits. And then the redundant tasks in the middle, like moving contacts into a database or moving sheets over or any of these things that you need to go through and like, oh man, if I do this all day long, this is taking up time, and then automate those practices. I dig it. What have you seen in terms of like what are something like been like one of the most exciting or mind blowing like automations or workflows that you've seen? You're like, oh, that is cool. Is there anything lately that you've seen
Mm.
as of recently that have been mind blowing?
Oh, wow. That's actually a really timely question. I saw a post this morning on LinkedIn from
Mm-hmm.
Nadia. I don't know if you've seen her YouTube channel or anything, but she's pretty involved in the end-to-end community, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And she entered a contest. She won the contest where it was like a YouTube thumbnail automation, and it was really really cool. The results. I always kind of thought that's something I would never automate, but after seeing the results, it at least opens my mind again to like this could be something where I would at least trust it to give me like 10 drafts right away. So she basically like had a system to get a bunch of high performing thumbnails, analyze why they were doing well. She also used like face swapping to make sure the right face was on all the thumbnails. It was a really really cool post, and I think I haven't just because I feel like I've been pretty tapped into what end can do. There haven't been too many use cases where I've been like, wow, like that's insane. But that one I was very impressed by. Yeah.
That's cool because we do know, like, especially with content creation, thumbnails take a ton of time. Thumbnails, hooks, and the premise, right? You're just kind of, okay, what am I going to say? How do I get started with this thing? And I could see how that could save a ton of time on like, and sometimes you just need to know, you just need to see options to know what's available. And that's why I think it's really cool about that because it may not generate it out the gate without you ever looking at it, but you're like, you could look at 1 out of the 10 and be like, oh, I actually like that one. I didn't think about it that way, and then start to iterate on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really really cool. In terms of like the next, where do you see this going in terms of AI automation? We'll say 3 months out because if I said 3 years, it doesn't really
Yeah.
quite do it.
I
This
wouldn't be able
is
to give you an answer.
flying cars and jets and mobiles or whatever we have, but like no, literally like 3 months out. Like where do you think we're evolving really quickly? I mean, you've only been doing this for it's like a year. Has it been like a year?
Almost a year. Yeah.
Almost. You've almost been doing it for a year, right? Right.
Yes.
And had a marginal impact on your life, I would say. Where do you think the next 3 months is going to go? What do you think we're evolving into? What do you expect?
The next 3 months, I think what I see happening is a lot more of the building stuff with natural language, I'd say. I think that and a mix of computer use. Because when I think of what I'm limited by when I want to automate certain things, it is times where there's like authentication you can't get past with an API, or they just don't have an API. So I think computer use is going to start to get more and more used, and also some more hype around it. But like I said, I think a lot of people are really, really craving that natural language to workflow building, natural language to agent building, whatever you want to call it. Just because we've seen that kind of blow up with Claude, Opus 4, and the N8N MCP server, and now with GPT-5, I'm sure there's going to be videos about it. I'm sure every company right now, just like we saw with the whole Lovable Bolt, the vibe coding era of natural language to web builders. I think every company that has any sort of workflow automation tool, Google dropped Opal or Opal, however you want to say it, and I think they're all more than capable of being able to spin up templates with natural language. And I think all that does is lower the barrier to entry even more. And that's why I'm very adamant about I don't want there to be a false sense of security across the world of like I know how to build agents because I spit a sentence into there and it built it. And but that's definitely where I see it going. As long I just hope that people are still getting to their first iteration, understanding exactly what's going on, customizing it a little bit, but more importantly, knowing how to improve it and add error handling and add guardrails. Because when I think about building workflows, whether I build it from scratch or whether I have an AI give me that first template, the last 20% is always the toughest because you basically need to test tons of different inputs, and then you need to test all those inputs again with a different model, and then you need to do it again with a different system prompt and do it again with all these changes. And that's actually how you get from a template that you see on YouTube, any of mine, truly, none of them are production ready because they need to be tested on your data, your use case. So that's really going to be the more important skill rather than just building workflows, is going to be making them actually ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. if you don't know the mission of the company of N8N, the purpose is to give technical teams the power of a 10x coder. And so if you look at this, the prompted workflows really do get you up and running, and it kind of gets you that hit of dopamine where you're like, oh, this is cool, I can do this. But really, anytime you get any incremental growth, like you learn some JSON or you learn how the nodes work, I think the definition of being technical is being redefined. And if you start to get familiarity with what N8N can do and you can start to level those things up, you really can massively explode your 10x development beyond just connecting credentials with template workflows. If you start to actually level up those skills, it really does give you the power of a 10x developer, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, completely agree. It really just, the way I always try to think of it is just, you just got to be logical. And it sounds super common sense. It sounds super simple and obvious, but whenever you're really faced with these issues, I feel like if you just like kind of take a step back and you think about, let's just forget that we're dealing with like N8N, or forget that we're dealing with something on a computer screen. Just like logically think about, if I was doing this manually and this is the issue I ran into, what would I go to change? Or where would I look next? And you'd actually be surprised how many people I've said that to when they're running into an issue. And I've said, like, step back and just look at it like this. It becomes very clear. You can see in their eyes, they're like, oh, if my automation breaks because I'm having an error reaching like the Google Drive server, if you were a human and you were having an error reaching the Google Drive server, what would you do? So it becomes a lot clearer. And I think sometimes people get tunnel vision a little bit because they're in this like N8N box.
Yeah, sometimes it's helpful to step away and go, okay, what's really going on here? And that's why maps are helpful. If you have a design map of any kind, you can go, okay, this node and this node are breaking. What is it? What are the different things I can do? And we just talked about different ways you can deeply understand it. You can look at it. You can look for communities that have it. You can look in the N8N forum, and you phone a friend, go to a paid community. These are all ways to overcome that. And then once you solve that, the next time, usually I've also noticed this, is the more painful it is to solve the problem, the less you're ever going to forget how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
I was like, I will never forget this lesson again. And I'm going to put that in my pocket and I'm going to save that and I'm going to share it with as many people as possible, which I think ties back to like the whole making content on YouTube is you're like, I want the world to know how to avoid this pain.
Yeah.
Do this thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Nate, love you being on the podcast. This was super epic. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before they tell them how to get a hold of you?
I would say now is the best time to be getting into it. And, obviously I'm a strong advocate for N8N, but another thing that I feel like I address a lot in my community is, what tool do I learn? Am I taking a gamble? And ultimately I think that because of like what we were just talking about with logic, if you actually understand the process of automation and high ROI opportunities, I don't think it matters which tool you use, because ultimately, you're becoming tool agnostic if you understand those fundamentals and the foundation. So let's say right now you are learning Make and you want to make the switch over, or you haven't started with one yet and you're trying to figure out which one to do. Don't feel like you're going to make the wrong choice, because I think ultimately those skills will transfer over. The difference there is just kind of the UI and the terminology or where the buttons are, but the skills are all the same. And those are the skills that are going to be in extremely high demand heading into this new year of 2026 in a few months. And yeah, that's kind of what I'll end off with there.
Yeah. The future is bright, and
Yeah.
these are like the true core skill sets of AI automation, thinking deeply, understanding these things, knowing how to work with the agents. It's all critical pieces to be able to solve real world problems real quick, which is incredible. Nate, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on my YouTube channel. Just type in Nate Herk and I should pop up. And then from there, you can find my free community or my plus group where we do, support, live calls, monthly hackathons, stuff like that. And then if you're on LinkedIn, I'll be over there too. So
Rad. Honor and pleasure, my friend. Much love, and I will see you on the other side. Take care now.
awesome. Yep. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
All right. Bye now.